So thanks, David. So good evening, everyone, and hello from Mumbai. My name is Rishika from TSA's India program, and today I'm going to be talking on behalf of my co-authors on a project studying the freshwater turtle communities in the lower Sarju River in northern India. So before I begin, I'd like to heartfully thank the Delta Foundation, the Uttar Pradesh Forest Department, the TSA Turtle Survival Alliance, and the Wildlife Conservation Society for all the support that has made this project possible. I'd also like to thank the Symposium for giving me this opportunity to speak to you guys today. So I'd like to start off just give a little bit of a background of turtle conservation in India at the moment. So even though India has 35 species of turtles, 29 freshwater and 5 marine species, nearly 75% of freshwater species are threatened at the moment. India ranks third in terms of countries with the highest number of threatened freshwater species. And yet turtles are generally a neglected taxa amongst conservation circles, with more attention generally given to megafauna like tigers, rhinos, and elephants. Even amongst turtles themselves, marine species tend to get a bit more attention, while any freshwater conservation gets couched within other herpetological programs as a subsidiary process. And because of this lack of basic knowledge on turtle biology on Indian species, it creates barriers in designing and proposing conservation programs. So it's really difficult to sell a plan to save a species to someone if we have no idea what their status is in the wild or their specific ecological or husbandry needs. But at the moment, there has been a recent rise in exclusive freshwater turtle programs in the country, especially, and one of the biggest supports come from a national program called the Namami Gange program launched by the Indian government, which has clear objectives related to turtle conservation and breeding programs. So the project itself was born from the simple lack of fundamental knowledge about turtles in India that would be needed to save a species. The Lord Sarju site itself was incidentally discovered by chance in 2007, and eventually in 2014, a baseline study was set up for the primary species, which was the crown river turtle, Hardshell thurgi. Although over time, as the river's species richness was discovered, the focus was shifted to study the entire assemblage itself. So regular sampling started around 2017, which is still continuing till date, and it helped us to establish that this one site holds probably one of the largest populations of Hardshell thurgi in the state, if not the country. And at the moment, it's probably one of the longest baseline study projects in India. So the lower Sarju River itself is part of the Ghagra Sarju River system within the Gangetic Basin in northern India. So it's a roughly 200-kilometer river that's little ribbons across the center of the map around there, and eventually joins the main stem, which is the Ghagra River towards the left. And it's located within the Tarai Arc landscape, which is an area of consisting of a mosaic of fragmented forests, grasslands, swamps, and wetlands along the Indo-Nepal border, which has also been recognized by the TSA as one of the top 5 turtle priority areas in the country at the National Tortoise and Freshwater Turtle Conservation Action Plan workshop in 2017. So the lower Sarju River itself has a variety of habitats, ranging from heavily vegetated sections with shallow depths to running to more open and deeper waters interspersed with much deeper pools within it. This is home to 9 species, making it one of the most biodiverse rivers in northern India and representing nearly 1/3 of freshwater species in all of India. And most importantly, this entire 200-kilometer stretch is completely unprotected. So out of the 9 species, you got 4 soft shells. You got Chitra indica at the top left, Lismus punctata, and the 2 Nilsonia species, Hurum on the left and Gangetica on the right. And out of the 5 hard shells, you've got Geoclamis hamiltoni on the top left there, which has recently been uplisted to an endangered status according to the IUCN Red List. And the Hardshell thurgi there in the center has been proposed to be endangered as well. So our project site itself is actually located in a really, in an area which has really high human activity, with a bridge running right over the area where we set our nets for sampling, which is regularly used and is surrounded by fishing villages that regularly fish in this area. It's also an important religious site with two temples on either banks of the river, on either the ends of the bridge, so just around that bush there and just around this bush on the right as well. And is regularly visited by heavy crowds on important festival days. So the methodology we've adopted over a 9-month field season, which we split over pre-monsoon and post-monsoon, which runs from July and August. So we tend to go for 12-hour sampling sessions, setting our nets for 12 hours, and we aim for a minimum of 5 sessions per month. And we tend to set gill nets of different sizes. So that's one of our field assistants there setting our gill nets in a different section of the river. And we try and spread out the sessions so we get a whole 24-hour reading of that particular site. And we tend to check our nets every 2 hours to make sure any animals don't drown. So once we've got our animals, we generally tend to collect basic morphometric information like carapace length, plastron length, width, mass, sex, species, and we try and do that as quickly as possible and return them to the river as soon as possible. So over the duration of this project, anecdotally, there have been quite a few interesting observations. The first of which that pops out is this Chitra indica individual, so a juvenile here. And we've only found this one individual over 3 years. So it begs the question where the rest of them, although we do know that there is a larger individual somewhere at the back because we've seen it from the top of the bridge at the back there. Again, one of my other favorites, Morenia petersi, Indian eye turtle. So the species tends to prefer more heavily vegetated areas with slightly shallower waters, but we've encountered only 3 individuals over 3 years, but in this site, which does not match that habitat profile at all. It has a deep pool. So it'd be interesting to know if there's any more or how we found it. Tend to see morphological variants as well, where, so this is a Nilsonia hurum individual, a female, and generally they're more olive green in color with a very clear mottled pattern across their carapace and face. But here is this individual is highly pigmented, so it's nearly black and you can barely tell the mottled pattern on the face as well. We tend to see seasonal sex ratio differences as well. So this is the crown river turtle, got a female on the left there, larger one, and a male on the right, displaying courtship behavior. And we tend to encounter males pre-monsoon coinciding with the courtship season, but post-monsoon, they completely disappear. So it begs the question, where do they actually go? So far until 2019, we've spent 73 days, totaling a total of 845 hours. And till date, sorry, not till date, till the end of 2019, we captured 2,004 animals, out of which 1,748 were unique captures with 256 recaptures. Out of that, all 9 species were recorded, and looking at the abundance trends, Hardshell thurgi seems to be disproportionately high compared to the others at nearly over 1,600 individuals. But if we remove that information, if you look at the graph below, we tend to see a few more other trends. So there's the other abundant species are the 2 Punctura species, so Puncturia tentoria flaviventer and Punctura tecta, as well as Nilsonia hurum and Geoclemis hamiltoni. So at the moment, we still believe we definitely need a lot more data to get any definitive trends on the species here. But on a preliminary level, we still see a few trends pop up. So there's fairly high survivorship amongst all the species with stable or slightly increasing populations. Because we caught so many Hardshell, we've been able to look at the sexes differently and see that there's actually a higher survivorship amongst females compared to males. However, Nilsonia hurum seems to have the lowest survivorship, and this probably coincides with the fact that they're heavily predated upon because for local illegal meat markets. So if we split that over seasons to see if there's any difference between pre and post monsoon, again, Hardshell is pretty standard, doesn't seem to show much of a trend, but once we remove that and look at the graph below, the 2 Punctura species clearly show that they're encountered more often pre-monsoon, while Nilsonia hurum and Geoclemis hamiltoni are encountered more often post-monsoon. If we split that further per year, again, there's not much of a trend with Hardella at the moment, but if we remove that, we expect to see a zigzag pattern, which we do with Geoclemis hamiltoni at the bottom there, which is the red maroon bars. So it's the higher in post-monsoon, matching the previous data. And an inverted pattern, same with the punctura at the back there with the light blue. So again, captures adjusted for the hours spent sampling tends to corroborate the same data where you've got not much of a trend seasonally with Hardella, but if you look at down below, you've got the two punctura species have a much higher encounter rate at in the pre-monsoon season, running from Feb to June, especially in 2019. Interestingly, Nilsonia hurum seems to be encountered across all seasons, and we possibly sort of suspect it might be closely related to Hardella in terms of ecological, the habitat needs, or probably an indicator species of some kind. So looking at recapture trends, so a total of 256 recaptures there's pretty standard rate in the first 2 years, but by 2019, they drastically increased to peaking up to 30%. So as we aim to continue this as a long-term project for several more years, we're constantly refining our methodology to collect more salient information that would be helpful. So one of those has been expanding the project to multiple sites. So currently, in addition to this current site, we have 2 other sites that we sample at. And we also have another 6 that have been sort of shortlisted out of a previous survey. We'd also like to sort of look at, rather than the main river, look at oxbow lakes and backwaters as well. And one of the biggest things we want to change and are planning to is reducing sampling gear bias by using more nets, different kinds of net, hook nets, and maybe baited traps and things like that. So as is the case with any natural history or population study, the aim is to eventually use that information to address conservation issues, which are continuously on the rise. As I mentioned earlier, there's severe human pressure at this site because of its holy status. So this is a picture taken from one of the festival days where people come in their hundreds, if not thousands, to sort of pray and bathe and throw sort of offerings into the river, end up heavily polluting the site as well. And because the entire river is a holy river, this kind of scene is common across its entire 200-kilometer length. Incidentally, the 5 gentlemen in the center there are part of a local NGO that works closely with the TSA India program to promote awareness about river pollution and turtle conservation in the area. So we're very thankful to their efforts. Another issue here is the fact that this entire river is unprotected. So fishing and poaching is very prevalent, but there's little we can do to take any action against that. But that's where information from projects such as these help us, where this baseline data that we've been getting, we've been using it to make recommendations to get this area registered as a community conservation reserve. One of the most pressing issues at the moment is the fact that there's a proposed expansion of this bridge at the back here, shown in one of the earlier pictures. And again, the information we've managed to collect over the last 3 years has been proving vital in making recommendations to authorities to shift the construction or even prevent it completely. So what's most interesting to me about this project here and at this single site is the fact not the answers given, even though the answers it's giving, but also the scale of research questions emerging from this one single site. And the possibilities are endless because you can multiply those research questions 9-fold based on the species richness here. So I really think this is one site that has the potential to revolutionize freshwater turtle research and conservation in India at the moment as this project continues in the future. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak today. And I think I already have a question. So why not use trammel nets instead of gill nets? You said many different gill nets at different sizes. So it's more, I mean, that's definitely something we can consider, and we look into usability of trammel nets. We're also sort of limited to what is available. So generally we adopted using gill nets because we use local We try to give sort of employment opportunities to the local fishing villages and sort of try and educate them at the same time. So our field assistant is comfortable with using GillNet. So that's what we started. But again, like I mentioned, we definitely want to keep revamping our methodology and upgrading it. So that's definitely a suggestion we'll take on. Thank you very much, wherever that came from. So it's higher. So what do you mean by higher survivorship of females over males? So it's just it's again, it's a very preliminary sort of information and sort of analyses that we've done to sort of get that, and it's shown like it's just a figure at the top that's shown like a higher survivorship. So I think, but again, I think there's probably a consequence of the fact that we tend to catch more females throughout all the seasons compared to we only catch males, after monsoon, before monsoon. So there might be a difference. We might need to see more males to actually see whether that trend, but at the moment, the analysis shows that there's higher survivorship in females. Are all these species known to be riverine, or is it marginal habitat for some? It varies. Again, there's such little information known about Indian turtles that we still sort of answering this question. So we know something like Hardella thurgi is definitely very, very aquatic. So I don't think they don't even come onto the bank to bask. They're fully aquatic, so all and possibly their nesting happens in the water as well. But there are other species that tend to come out of the water for basking and nesting. So again, there's just such a lack of information that these are brilliant questions that we could definitely research in the future. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll hand it over back to David.